The main thing with turkeys anyways is we keep them for so long. Broilers are off to market at a pretty early age, whereas turkeys, especially the toms and that, will be kept 18 to 20 weeks or so. And so you're kind of constantly struggling, with the issue of footpad dermatitis development and that, because, they're on bedding, some kind of bedding that converts to litter, and trying to manage that. So then just, I think in general, managing a turkey house, and this is my own opinion, is much more difficult.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Poultry Podcast. I'm your host, Pratima Adekari from Mississippi State University. Today we have a very experienced guest who has served in the turkey industry for quite a while. We have Dr. Sally Noll. Dr. Noll, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, so I'll give a little bit more of my background in that. So yes, I've been at the University of Minnesota since 1985 and worked primarily with the turkey industry. And my position was primarily extension with a research component. And I have to say, for those of you that might be considering going into extension, to really seriously consider it. I enjoyed it very much over the years, and it gave me the opportunity to learn a whole bunch more about the industry, as well as different facets and issues in the industry. So I've done a little bit of turkey breeder, turkey market, waste management, nutrition, gut health, you name it. I probably have done at least some of it. So in collaboration with others, of course.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Noll. So I know you retired back in 2022, but you're still active. So you do, always the work is never finished. And once you have these a profession built up, then it's hard to also get away. So how much are you busy these days with research?
Well, I tell people that emeritus status means you work for the university for free. So, but you don't have quite as many meetings and reports and everything. So yeah, when I retired, I was on, I think, about 6 other student graduate committees yet, along with my own student, Gabby Firo.
Wow.
And so we were still finishing up things there. And since then, most of those have finished, but now I got added to a couple more committees, which I like. I like mentoring the students and everything. And when COVID hit in 2020, we lost, a lot of personnel and handling of data. I mean, not handling of data, but getting the data flow going again. So we're still kind of working on some of that stuff that just had to get pushed back to get going again. So.
Join the Poultry Science Association at our inaugural PSA Pacific Rim Scientific Conference, October 13th through 16th in Macau, China, to explore groundbreaking symposia and hear the latest research impacting the global poultry industry. Here is your chance to present your latest work, recruit future leaders, and network with other experts in the field. Help us shape the future of poultry science. Register now at poultryscience.org. See you in Macau.
Sure. And in fact, I was able to attend the International Poultry Scientific Forum last week, and I, in fact, saw your name as a co-authors in one of the abstracts. So I guess you're so active.
Yeah, so that was, kind of just providing some advice, which... but yes, it's nice to stay involved. Unfortunately, a little bit before when I retired, we also had to shut down our Rosemount turkey research facilities, and so kind of another reason to take and retire, as well as the type of research I needed, or I was doing, needed a different type of facility, a much upgraded facility as well. So I really do miss that part, although lifting 40-pound and 40-pound plus turkeys really wasn't getting to be my strong point anymore. So.
No, that's great. Now we're gonna learn today a little bit about unique. Well, it's a very common topic, which is a footpad dermatitis. And Dr. Noll, we have heard this a lot with the broilers, and what about in turkey? So why this is an issue? Can you tell a little bit about a background?
Yeah. So, unfortunately, there isn't a whole bunch of research being done in turkeys. It's very expensive to do, but I think when you're comparing broilers versus turkeys, yes, I mean, footpad dermatitis is probably as much of a problem in turkeys as it is in broilers. But the main thing with turkeys, anyways, is we keep them for so long. Broilers are off to market at a pretty early age, whereas turkeys, especially the toms and that, will be kept, 18 to 20 weeks or so. And so you're kind of constantly struggling, with the issue of footpad dermatitis development and that because, they're on bedding, some kind of bedding that converts to litter and trying to manage that. So then just, I think in general, managing a turkey house, and this is my own opinion, is much more difficult than say for broilers and that relative to ventilation. But yeah, it's a definite problem in turkeys. For those of you that might not be aware, turkeys will be raised in two phases, or at least two phases anyways. One will be brooding, and then they'll be transferred over to a grow finish facility. And so there's opportunities for footpad dermatitis to develop all the way through production.
Yeah, so yeah, that's so after knowing, yeah, it is also common in Turkey. So with my knowledge, I have very limited and maybe zero knowledge in Turkey. So thanks for telling that. There's a huge importance. I can see that. What causes this thing? What are the different? I know there are a lot of factors, but in your last so many years past experience, what are the common cause that you have experienced and what really causes that?
So, I mean, probably not, not unknown. I mean, litter moisture is probably one of the key things, that is involved in
Right.
terms of the development. And then there's some different components of the litter as well that may interact with the skin, such as ammonium, nitrogen. And but I think kind of getting back to, so where does that litter moisture come
All
from?
right.
And it can come from a variety of things. And I think that's part of the problem in terms of management. You kind of forget all the different sources, where that moisture can be coming from. So obviously you have, what's going on with the birds themselves and in terms of excreta, moisture content and that, how much water is being taken in, how well functioning the waters are. Water quality also plays a role in that in terms of potentially overconsumption and water operation and that. And then kind of don't want to forget about feed too. I do have a little bit of a nutrition background, so I can't, but we get into some of the things with the minerals, like sodium, potassium, chloride, obviously the electrolytes in that, and an imbalance of those, can affect water consumption and the excreta content, and also potentially, excesses of calcium and phosphorus can interact with that too. And that's a little bit of what my graduate students' work on footpad dermatitis showed. Gabby Firo worked long and hard on footpad dermatitis, and and so she did note a correlation, anyways, with poor footpad quality when the litter was high in content of sodium and potassium and chloride. And I think that just reflects that potentially the birds were drinking more water and then excreting those minerals into the litter and that. So, I mean, so we've got the feed, we've got what's going on with the watering system, how much water the birds are actually intaking. And then the other part of it then would be, management of ventilation and the removal of that moisture, from the litter, which again, in a large turkey house costs a lot of money to do that. And so it makes it difficult, to take and manage the litter to keep it from caking. People will take and till, do some litter amendments as well to try to modify and keep the moisture in check.
Yes, so typically in a broiler diet, in layers diet, we balance for sodium and chloride. So we make sure in our formulation, we don't make sure we're not going above beyond the limit. I'm sure you do that for turkey, right?
Oh, yes, yeah. They're all fed a highly formulated, balanced diet, but at times you can get, ingredients that have different composition.
Right.
Or maybe a little more salt gets added than you think it was going to be added or something like that. So so definitely, nutritionists and the feed mills definitely are really paying a lot of attention to the quality of the feed and the formulations and that. But those things, can still happen yet. So.
Yeah. Do you balance more than beyond sodium and chloride any other electrolyte like potassium? Anything like that? Has it been coming in a turkey nutrition side of the things?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think
Hmm.
people are looking at the electrolyte balance and that because of the impact that, it can not only have on management, but on other things that are going on with the diet as well and that. So, yeah, and I
Right.
know in the research program, when we're doing a particular amino acid trials or something that we're adding a lot of material like chloride into the diet and that we would definitely try to take and balance that out. So, yeah.
Yeah, so are we talking about like a market age turkey, right? Typically that goes before, and then we want to control. How long, when does it really start? I mean, at the grower starter, like at the grower phase, or when do you see a lot of these footpad dermatitis happening? As a later phase of their production, or at the middle, or the beginning? So how common is it and when?
Well, okay. Well, definitely, you can see it in the brooder house, okay? Because the
Okay,
birds are growing fairly quickly. They may be encountering some enteritis conditions during that time too, which is going to take impact the moisture. As
hmm,
they're growing fast in that, as they get closer to the time, when those birds are going to be moved, um,
hmm,
there's that chance of feed and excreta, packing up underneath the feeders and that, or excreta, packing up around the on the litter, by the waters and that, and then the birds have contact with that material, and then that kind of starts the inflammation, on the bottom of the foot pad. And in the
right,
brooder barn, the producers will be paying a lot of attention to try to keep that caking down, get that material mixed in or removed or whatever, so the birds don't have that contact with it. And in the field studies that Gabby did, we actually found a relatively low occurrence of footpad dermatitis, in the brooder barn. Um,
okay,
on average, it was generally, somewhere between, I mean, a fair majority of the birds didn't have any lesions at all, and the other ones had some, minor lesions, which actually, when we talk about scoring later on, we found out that a lot of times in the brooder barn, when we compared to postmortem scoring anyways, that they might have been overestimating the issue. But then when the birds move into the grower house, again, for a while, um, well, these are very fast growing birds. And
right.
densities are there too, and so after a while, you do see this issue with some of the litter caking up. Moisture kind of sits on top of that, and then the birds will take and have contact with that material and develop a more severe form of footpad dermatitis. And and then it kind of usually seems, around that 8 to 12 week time period anyways, which is more difficult. The birds are adjusting and growing fast. Maybe might be something going on with their gut at that time. And that's,
Right.
where we had gotten into some things on probiotics, prebiotics, to try to help with that transition. But in general, and unfortunately, by the time the birds go to market, at least in the field studies that Gabby did, her findings were such that almost all birds had some kind of lesion on the bottom of their foot. Now, some of this might have been a very small lesion or very, mild or moderate lesion, but definitely the number of and the percentage of severe lesions had really increased from when they were moved into the brooder facility.
Yeah.
Moved from the brooder facility.
Yeah, since Dr. Noll, since you mentioned about now we and thank you for driving this conversation because I was going to ask you about the scoring system and for more advanced producers or others who are interested to know, right? I mean, how this foot pad dermatitis is assessed in the field? How do you what is kind of typical scoring system look like if you can share about it?
Yeah, so maybe just to add a comment about scoring in the field. With turkeys, again, they're big birds. And
Right.
so it is difficult to score, especially if you're looking at trying to score market birds. It's very difficult. They're big birds, and if they're not handled correctly, you can get some damage to the wings and that type of thing. But from the project that Gabby was working on, we're trying to look at how accurate live scoring was to what we would call postmortem scoring, or scoring at the processing plant, which would generally be considered to be more accurate because of the conditions and a little bit of processing on the footpad to make the lesion a little clearer in that. But so basically the scoring system we used, and the name escapes me right now, and I'm sorry about that. But anyways, you kind of go between, do you want a simplified scoring system, or do you want something that's going to capture a lot of detail? And so the scoring system that we were using, a 0 would be either no lesion at all, or just the very, very beginnings of a lesion. Maybe a small amount of discoloration. And then a 1 would be something that would be a little more moderate. You're seeing more discoloration, maybe a little bit of swelling, something that's called hyperkeratosis, where the scales start to kind of lift up off of the footpad and that. And then we get to score 2, which is where you have the necrotic lesions, where it's down deeper into the epidermis. And I should say that, for one thing, I'm trying to remember, we had about 150 individual samples we were tracking all the way through these different scoring systems and that. And we never did see one where the lesion actually got down into the dermis. So it was, for the most part, a lot of times at least, somewhat superficial, if you want to call that. But some of those lesions did get fairly deep. So for the criteria anyways, there's so many things you could look at. So some of the scoring systems might be looking at the depth of the lesion, how big the lesion is on the footpad part, did it spread to the toes themselves. So it gets a little bit complex about, and if once you have 3 or 4 things you're looking at, I can see where it gets easier. Some people will pick out swelling maybe easier than some people might pick out, a little bit of change in coloration or something like that.
Okay.
And then you kind of can get into a discussion about, well, is a small lesion versus a large lesion, are they really the same thing? So are you scoring on size?
Right.
So what we kind of saw in several studies anyways, and also on the field trial, is when it was at score 1, that intermediate lesion that caused the most problem.
Right.
And what was a little bit interesting in the brooder barn, as I mentioned, let's see, I'm trying to think now. In the brooder barn, a lot of times a score 1 was assigned when it was actually a normal. Okay. So for some reason with the smaller feet, and it could be again that you've got that little spot there, and because of that it looks like it's filling up the whole footpad or something. But then when we got to the market birds, we actually found out that many of the birds that were scored 1 actually were probably closer to a score 2. And and for scoring where it's being used in animal welfare audits and that, you kind of want to make sure that you're a lot more accurate with that, with what that score is telling you. So, and we did some pairing, we would have people both score the same sample in that. And actually the agreement, although again, depending upon who was scoring, the agreement was actually a little better than I thought it would be. So.
Oh, that's good. Because I was thinking, because people score, and there should be a kind of a standard, like what you said, 0, 1, or 2 scoring. But sometimes, 0 is 0. Maybe may not be a debate of a thing, but sometimes a 1 or 2, and similarly in the other kind of scoring. For example, I do few keel bone, like keel scoring in layers. So most of the time we have to, I make sure I have people around me, like 2 or 3, and we kind of come in agreement, because then I see what you're saying, because sometimes it's not objective, it's really subjective. So You want to make sure people you respect their opinion. I mean,
Yeah,
yes, that's and I think that could be a challenge. I mean, especially with the turkey bird, and not many of the people or faculty or researcher work in Turkey, so there could be another challenge there, which with a minimum experience.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, at least in our research trials, again, we would typically have two people scoring at the same time, and we would have a chart with the
Okay.
description and the photographs and everything, and that's the best way to do it. But you get out into a commercial turkey barn, and
Yeah.
if you do want to take and do some live scoring, most likely you're going to probably only have one person that's going to be scoring. So, but it also points out you know the aspect of having good training, mentoring who's ever going to be doing that scoring and that, so that they recognize the lesions and can score appropriately then.
Yeah, Sally, like I'm just curious to know, I mean, from your experience working with the turkey and footpad dermatitis, how what is the effect of these dermatitis with these birds having high score, 2 or 3, with the relationship to the gut health? Are the gut health good? Have you looked into that relationship? How good are these birds, like digestion wise, or have you looked into those connections? I'm sure you have. So, what is your take on?
I wish we had. So,
I know.
pretty much information that we, at least for the field trials, we got a sense, for whether the flock was doing good or not.
Hmm.
Um, but unfortunately, while we had a lot of individual observations within a flock, we didn't have a large number of flocks, and so it was
Okay.
we didn't have enough information to try to bring those two together, unfortunately. So
Yeah. So, can this bird recover back once they get the food pattern dermatitis?
yes, and I'm glad you brought that up
Yep.
because in scoring systems generally don't recognize recovery.
Okay. Okay.
It's still listed at for the scoring system, which I forgot was Dr. Berg from Sweden. She had published a number of papers on footpad scoring systems, and that was her system that we were using. Apologize for not remembering that
No problem. Okay.
before, but
It's all right.
okay. But one of her pictures actually shows a regenerating footpad, and
Okay.
so basically, what happens is you get that damage to after you get that to the number 2 level, quite a bit of the surface of the footpad is affected. Material skin is kind of starting to slough off. So I shouldn't say skin, but the upper levels of the epidermis are sloughing off, and the scales have also come off at the same time, and so it looks like a very smooth surface. But you're not seeing the discoloration, the necrotic material anymore. So that epidermis is starting to recover at that time.
Okay.
And I think it would
Okay.
be worthwhile to maybe include that in a scoring system that, yeah, the birds kind of might have gone through a little bit of a tough time, but now the footpad is recovering.
So they can recover back. So how long does it take for them to recover? Like a week, few days?
Oh my goodness, yeah, you wish. But um,
Are you sure?
so we also followed some birds where we purposely put them on litter and wetted it,
Mm-hmm.
and we got the litter moistures up to around 50% plus or so,
Yes.
and that happened over a week time. And then a week later, the birds had already developed a fair amount of lesions that we would have given a score 1 at that time. And then after a while, we stopped wetting, and then they continued for another week after that for the
Yeah.
scores to take and worse and get worse.
Okay.
But then we started to let the litter dry out naturally, and the scores started to go down. But it was a good 2 weeks for them to uh, not be as severe, but they were probably still, around the score of 1 yet, even after a couple of weeks. So it
Yeah.
does take a fair amount of time, for that lesion to take and heal.
Yeah, no, we know that the bird health, there's a nutrition, there's welfare, and health associated with birds. So everything is very important. And again, we're talking about this market age turkey, and I mean, if their food is not good, then we have a lot of problem going into the market. So I'm really glad today I was able to talk with you about a little bit different gear, bringing turkey in our conversation of the podcast.
Mhm.
It's time for our famous three.
In poultry nutrition, purity of ingredients matters. Impurities in feed can impact bird health, performance, and formulation accuracy. That's why understanding how purity is measured through stability, traceability, and product analysis is key. High D is one example of a 25O HD3 source where purity has been rigorously tested. Learn more in our recent article on why purity matters in animal nutrition at dsm-firmenich.com.
I am very curious to ask you one question, which is out of the conversation. So I saw at the back of there's a lake girl, the poster you have. Is there any story you want to share?
Well, well, even though I'm still working for free for the university, I have been trying to develop different hobbies. And so fishing I've always liked to fish.
Yeah,
And then
it's cool.
I was actually at a Minnesota Turkey Growers Conference. I think it was up in Detroit Lakes, and I went into the gift shop, and it's like, oh, I want this. So yeah, I tried to get out on the lake. I also started to take up fly fishing too.
Cool.
Even though I've been working at it for 3 or 4 years, the number of fish I've caught has been relatively small, but it's still fun.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed today, and thank you for your time. I know you're super busy, even though you're not. You're already emeritus, but as you mentioned, you look very busy. But I really appreciate your time, and thank you for sharing your knowledge. Do you have anything to share to our audience before we wrap up?
I think, footpad dermatitis is a struggle. But it is something that, to keep an eye on and, look at that processing data really closely. Maybe there's opportunities, at least for turkeys, when you are handling the birds, that you can take a quick look at the foot pads and see what's going on without making any special effort as well. So, yeah, so just keep after it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, as being Turkey being unique to the North America side of it, so we need to find more in this country. More research needs to be done.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sally Noll, for today's episode. For all of you listening or watching us in different platform, thank you for watching this episode today. I hope you guys learned something out of it. I learned something out of it with Dr. Sally Noll's conversation. Again, until next time, I will see you again. Thank you all and take care.
Bye-bye.